today's topic, we're going to be talking about conflict resolution.
So we say there needs to be a pledge of commitment before you can even start, because if you're not committed to the process, it's going to go left very fast. It's going to go left very fast. You're going to shut down, walk out, start, as she said, start cursing or whatever behavior you choose. You're going to do that very quickly if you're not committed to the process, because you're going to find in conflict resolution, obviously, before you even begin, you know there are opposing thoughts or opinions. So before you can even start, you need to say, okay, I'm committed to getting this thing resolved. Then pray. Pray for everyone in the conflict. Now, it starts with us first, and Lord, give me an open heart to receive from you, to hear your voice, first of all, to receive your guidance, and also an open heart so that I will be compassionate and empathetic towards the person with whom I'm having my conflict. So we say, in praying for everyone in that conflict, it starts with you, that the Lord will give you an open heart. And I add in there, I say an open ear, so that you would hear. So that you would hear what he has for you to do as Christians. Now, this supersedes how the world does it. The world, of course, they have their business model, and it can certainly be effective. And a lot of what we're going to talk about and have talked about, it meshes with the world model. But as Christians, there's a higher expectation. It supersedes just I want to get out of it what I can get out of it, so I want to get it resolved. As Christians, let it start with us. We're going to check ourselves before we can come to the table and expect for these things to happen. Then prepare. Prepare before asking for a meeting. Like, what are your expectations for this meeting? Then when you decide what you want to happen after the meeting is over, you have those expectations. But guess what? When you go to this meeting and as a part of your preparation, and this is a personal plan, you say, okay, if it does not happen this way, then do I have an alternative solution? And like I said, the world model may be we're gonna shut down the table. We're not getting any. You didn't get what you want. I didn't get what I want. We're just gonna shut it down. No, as God as our guide, we say, what are my expectations? But don't just have one way. Remember, being empathetic, have some flexibility. So if this doesn't happen, already in your mind, go ahead and prepare. Okay, then maybe this could happen. Let's try it this way. Propose a time to talk, as she mentioned, face to face. Come up with a time that's conducive, that works for everyone. I often say when the atmosphere is conducive for resolution, because if we just go in at any time, there are times, for example, in a relationship and your spouse gets home from work, he or she has had a very tiring day and they come in the house, or they had a lot going on before they walked in, or even have a lot to do once they get there, and you just confront them, then a lot of times you've already started off on a bad foot, because then that is not a good time for us having a meeting. So when you want to talk face to face, then you may have to say, this is not the best time. The kids are around, or you got colleagues around, or as she mentioned earlier, you got friends around. This is never a good time. And as I often would tell when I worked with high school students in my career as well, I would tell them, would you want someone to come up to you in the middle of a crowded space and start, asking you questions or going, they're like, no. I'm like, well, then you offer that same respect. Now, I'm going to say as adults, we do the same thing. You propose a time to talk that's face to face, but when it is conducive for both of you, because if not, one person may have his or her guard up, which is oftentimes going to cause the conflict to go left, like I said, very, very quickly.
And I want to add to that how important the face-to-face is. A lot of times when we try to solve a conflict through text messaging or a phone call, it oftentimes you're not seeing those nonverbals. So you start to assume they meant one thing and they were totally not even thinking that. but the way they wrote it in the text had you feeling some kind of way. So that the face-to-face is important, because we say in communication and solving, the content is only 7% of what is conveyed. And the tone, how you say it, is 38%. But the body language, that's 55%. So it's important that face-to-face contact, so they can really see how you're feeling and how, what you are really meaning. And you have that opportunity to ask those questions. I'm not sure what you mean by this, which is way different than when you put it in a text.
And I want to add in there distractions. So, when you come face to face, you eliminate the distractions, because they're right. If you're doing it on social media, you have so many things distracting you. But even when you come face to face, remember your purpose for coming. And she talked about that earlier, your purpose. And then when you come together, hopefully the purpose is to resolve it and everybody goes away in a much better state. So be mindful of, I know we live in an age of social media and people oftentimes are on their phones. That serves as a distraction. When something is as important as getting a conflict resolved, put the phone down during this face-to-face meeting. Okay? A private place. Provide a private place. We said that's important in moving forward to make sure that everybody's okay with that. Then, purpose to be honest. Take responsibility. When you're purposing that, this is, once again, personal plan. Before you even get to the table, take responsibility for your role in any conflict. And it's not uncommon for people to say, well, it's not my fault. It is not my fault. All the issues, all the problems are stemming from them. But oftentimes when there is conflict, when you can really talk about it, you'll find that, there is a role that both people played to some degree. Some parts are much greater, but when you go in there, it's not my fault, it's not my fault, it's all your fault. First of all, take responsibility for any role that you may have played, if that is the case, may have played in the conflict, if there was any responsibility on your behalf. And try to look at it from somebody else's viewpoint. Look at it from their viewpoint, how they may see it. And this is where the empathy comes in, because you try to see, sometimes really it is just simply a misunderstanding. A lot of conflicts I have been a part of getting resolved, a lot of times they have been misunderstandings. But had there not been the communication and the face-to-face, then a lot of it wouldn't have gotten resolved, because as she said earlier, there are often other people involved. So all would always bring them together, whether I was working with big kids in a school, high school, or even as a minister, when I've worked with people in the church, I have brought in people, and I've had one person's like, no, I don't want to talk to her. I don't want to, even though she had an issue with this lady, she said, I don't want. So that to me was a red flag, because if we really want it resolved, we want it better. It's not fair to place all the blame on one individual because we want it resolved, because that other person in talking did not even perceive that there was really an issue. So let's come together face to face, but try to see it from somebody else's viewpoint. And this one is a challenge. Permit total forgiveness. This one is a really, really big challenge for a lot of people. You got to want to choose to forgive, and I often use the foundation of how God forgave us. Therefore, the expectation is we'll forgive others, because He's forgiven us countless times. He does it daily, because we err, we make mistakes daily, yet He forgives us. So before we can go in there with instead of going with all guns loaded, both barrels loaded and pointing to the sky like I'm ready for you, let's be willing to forgive. Let's have that open mind. And sometimes that means we have to work through some things. And allowing God to reestablish a bond. And this is key, because we'll say, Lord, we want you to help us. But then, as I said before, when we pray, we want to have an open mind. It's like I said, an open ear to hear from Him. But we want God to come in and do a work, because He has to work on our hearts. Because in our flesh, no good good thing dwells in our flesh. And that's scripture. No good thing dwells in our flesh. But we have to ask God to come in and reestablish this bond that has been broken, that has affected our relationship. And that happens too when we become the vessels for him to use, and we don't begin to just do it our way and our way only. Okay? So when we do that, let's stop also rehearsing the faults of the other person. They may have done some bad things, some wrong things, some things that affected you or offended you. But when we rehearse them over in our minds, we go in there and we're not going in there ready to resolve. We're just going in there ready to get off of our chest what it is that's bothering us. That's not resolution. Resolution is says, oh, not only am I getting off of our chest, but I'm also listening to the other person, because at the end of the process, we want resolution. This is what conflict resolution isn't going in and telling somebody off. That's not conflict resolution. That's just telling them off and just saying what you want to say. It's not getting it resolved. Perceive a future harvest, it says. So if you planted some seeds, this is key. If you've already planted some seeds, perceive a future harvest, then understand that when you plant the seeds, just like in the natural, there has to be a process. That seed changes. There's a mutation. It changes into a blossom or a flower or a plant, full-grown plant. It's a process. So change requires a process. We can go in there. Sometimes I have been so fortunate to be a part of it and serving as a mediator, where people have come in, and at the end of that particular session, things were resolved. They were able to communicate, and there were some miscommunications, and they walked out, both smiling and communicating. That's not always the case. Sometimes it is a process, but you plant the seeds. You can't control what seeds someone else plants, but you can control your seeds, what you plant. And then you want God to be pleased with with the way you approach conflict resolution. So you plant the seeds and then allow God to do the watering, and trust that the process, sometimes it will take time. Present the present conflict. Resist bringing up the past, the present conflict. Mm-hmm. I hear this a lot, and in counseling, we hear this a lot. They just cannot seem to let go of what had happened, and understandable, because that's what brought you to the place of having conflict or being hurt. That's understandable. But you play and rehearse it over and over and over again. It is hard, obviously, to let go and forgive. So at some point, you got to stop bringing up that past over, because if you do, you're not going to get the conflict resolved, because that person's going to say, no matter what I do, and I hear this, unfortunately, a bit, no matter what I do, they keep bringing up what I did, and they're not responding to what I'm doing now because they're stuck on what I did. So look at that as present the present conflict. Dwell in the now, the here and the now, and not the past.
And we often say, if you're constantly looking back or going back, you can't go forward. So in order to go forward, you have to stop looking back.
And that's key. That's key, because sometimes that is, I know it's easier said than done, but it's doable. It's doable. But you have to purposely remember, this is a personal plan. You can't put this on someone else. This is for you. These are some things you have to do yourself. Exercise, work on yourself before you can get that conflict. So you're gonna prepare yourself before you come to the table, so to speak. Promote fairness and objectivity. Stick to the facts. Stick to the facts. Avoid generalizations. This is what you want to do. Stick to the facts. Not he said, or I heard, or she said. A lot of that, or I think, and I hear that sometimes in counseling, this is what I believe. I say, but have you seen this, or do you know this to be true? No, but that's what I believe. I believe, and that's what they're stuck on. Avoid those generalizations and just stick to the facts, because this is what you're going to have to work with, which are the facts. Protect privacy. She talked about this earlier. Don't involve others. And this is so natural. Well, that's my BFF. That's my best friend. That's my girlfriend. That's my boy. And then you involve them and you bring them into the mix. And it often cloudies the process. It makes it more challenging because you got these people involved. And then guess what? In reality, that you hear this in your ear, one is in your ear, and then you got the mediator or your person you're trying to resolve it with saying this, and this other person who might have a different perspective in your ear, and then you feel like I'm confused or I'm not going to trust the process. So we often will say to you, be careful who you tell your business to. That's just plain layman's terms, okay? Be careful who you tell your business to. Protect the privacy. Once you begin this process, and I will tell this to couples a lot, then even though you may have family members, you have your good friends, your girlfriends, your boy, at this point you need to not share what's going on in this process, because guess what? They're not here, and oftentimes they're going to often just have that person's best interests at heart, not the whole process and the total outcome. We're going to say also, preserve individuality. Value the differences. Everybody's different. They're not like you. So preserve that individuality. Protect oneness, openness and optimism. So that's key. Using I statements, not you. Because if you go in there, then they're going to already throw up their hands. That wall's coming up. They're going to become very defensive. So when you're constantly saying you. So we're saying, use I statements. What about, okay, I feel this way, or this is what I did. Not oftentimes, you don't want to go in there often saying you. And Tinder mentioned earlier the body language. Be cognizant, aware of your body language when you go in there. Like I said, if you come in there looking like you got both barrels loaded, like, okay, when I walk in, I'm ready, then you've already set a negative atmosphere. So practice love. And this is remember, this is personal plan. Practice love. Express appreciation and the care that you have for a person and the time. But you need to practice love, because if you don't, then how do you expect to receive it? That's a double standard.
So coming up with that personal plan is important for each individual person, because you are in charge of you and you control your destiny. So a few of these tips that I'm about to give is 9 things to avoid when solving conflict. Now, we have talked about some of them, but I would like to reiterate. The first thing is the way you start out. Don't come out, as Stanley said, with both barrels loaded. Come out with a positive attitude, because when you come out and the horns are already up, then that already sets the atmosphere for a negative tone. So no harsh startups. Criticism. It's okay to be upset about the issue, but a lot of times we will start to attack the person, not the issue, but the person. So we have to be careful. This is a person that we care about, a person that we love. So you have to separate that from whatever the conflict is. So be careful of criticism. Invalidation. We talk a lot about people want to be validated. No one wants to be invalidated, making someone feel worthless, making them feel devalued, that they're not cared about, that they're put down. We don't want to invalidate the person. So we need to make sure that our actions and our words are not directed towards the person. We have to keep it in context of what the situation is. And a lot of times when we don't think through the situation, we use words, we use negative connotations towards a person that we wouldn't have used otherwise if we weren't upset or angry. So defensiveness, counterattacking, and reflect and blame. In most situations, it's not always the other person's fault. As we talked about earlier, you have to be honest with yourself and take ownership. So when you start out blaming the other person, you are automatically putting up a wall. They are starting to put up that wall. And in some cases, that's when the escalation starts. The back and forth, the arguing, it's your fault. And it gets out of control to the point that oftentimes one or the other will leave without the conflict being solved, or the conflict is taken to another level. Number 6 is stonewalling. We talked about that earlier. That's a form of withdrawing or disengaging. A lot of times when things aren't going our way, then we'll just shut it down without resolving it. So we have to realize that just like the other person is feeling some type of way, we have to remember that it's not all about us. Flooding is the next one. Being overwhelmed. And a lot of times we get overwhelmed when we have not made that personal plan, when we have not made a commitment to the relationship, when we have not spent time in prayer about the situation, we will tend to get overwhelmed. But God said that I will give you a peace that will surpass all understanding. So when we go in with the right mindset, that will keep us from feeling so overwhelmed. Number 8 is negative interpretations. Feeling like someone is out to get you. A lot of times Satan will plant those seeds that someone is always out to get us, that they are attacking us. And we have to be careful to the different voices we listen to, because Satan will use whomever he can to get to you. So be careful in thinking people are out to get you. And the last one is one that we talked about, is that negative body language. When you go in with that chip on your shoulder, everybody can tell. When you go in and your forehead is wrinkled, or you go in and, you're snapping at everybody, people recognize that this is probably not going to end well. So these are just some things that we want you to be mindful of before you step into the situation. Because the key is for it to be resolved. Not necessarily a bargaining, you get something, I get something. But when it is truly resolved, then everybody is at ease. Everybody is at peace. Everybody feels comfortable. They don't have to worry about, well, I had to give up this or I had to give up that. But when it is truly resolved, then everybody feels good about the situation.
And just want to reiterate the things to avoid, because a lot of times we want that resolution, but we just want them to change. So a lot of these things that we mentioned today are things that start with us as individuals. We got to get ourselves in check. We got to go in there with the mindset that we want resolution. And with that being said, I say oftentimes to people, especially marriages, we can do it on our jobs. We'll go in there, and whether it's genuine or not, we don't go when our supervisors, our bosses, and our directors or whoever call us. We usually, most of us, do not go in there from the beginning the same way we will approach someone that we have a personal relationship with. We usually treat it differently, but that same atmosphere that's conducive so that there's no screaming, there's no yelling, no profanity, and at the end of the day, there's a resolution. We can approach that same process with those that we're close to. So these are things we say, as I said, these 9 things she said, I want to reiterate, are to what we should avoid. And then those things, as I said, we talked about that personal plan. Look at those things. Think about those things, how they can better prepare you for getting, at the end of the day, what you want. Because that's really what it is. Everybody really wants what they want. Let's be honest. But how can we both get what we want? How can we both walk away from here at least feeling some sense of accomplishment, that something was accomplished through this process? But it starts with us before we ever come to the table. Sometimes we have to get ourselves, as my mom would say, you need to get yourself together. Sometimes we have to get ourselves together before we can ever even come to the table to bring about the resolution that is needed in this relationship. Not so much about them. You said, well, they need to do the same thing. Yes, it will be wonderful. And that would be awesome to bring about the resolution. But at the end of the day, you control you and no one else controls you and your choices. So keep that in mind. How do you bring that to fruition? You do your homework. You talk about these things you shouldn't be doing, and then also look at that list of those others of things that you should be doing before you go to the table for conflict resolution. It works whether you're young or whether you're old. These are things that I assure you, they really do work. And at the very, very end, I want to say this. As she said from the beginning, sometimes you do need a mediator. I serve and I do not believe that it would have gotten resolved if they had not come to me or a mediator to get it resolved, somebody to help guide the process. Sometimes that is necessary. You may say, I can't do this on my own, but even with the mediator, these tips do work. So if you need a mediator, mediators are available to help you through this process. But once again, you've got to be willing. You've got to be willing to trust the process. You've got to be willing to do your part in order to bring about the resolution. So with that being said, we're going to conclude today, and our contact information is on the screen. As she said earlier, she's Tinger Purvis, and that's tinger.purvis@wordtab.net. I'm Stanley Purvis, stanley.purvis@wordtab.net. Our contact information, if you need to call us here through the counseling ministry or the marriage ministry, is 252-210-3434, or just send us an email if you want to do it discreetly at marriageministry@wordtab.com, or through the counseling ministry, WTC Counseling @wordtab.com. So we are a resource for you. There's a team of us, as we often say. Then outside of WordTab, there are thousands and thousands of counselors out there, people and therapists who can help you through your process, but don't feel like I will never, ever get this resolved because I can't do this. So we just want you to know there are resources out to help you get through your process, but please, please, please understand it can be accomplished if you prepare yourself and understand that God has your back.